In the next activity, you are going to talk about when you do different chores. First, I'm going to give you some examples of different words you can use to talk about how frequently you do different activities. First, I'm going to give you some examples of when I do different chores. For example, in my case, I always do the dishes. I always do the dishes every time I finish eating. Of course, there are some other chores that I never do. I never iron my clothes. And obviously, there are some chores that we do sometimes. I sometimes sweep the floor. I only do this when the floor is dirty. And there are also chores that we do a little more frequently. In my case, I often make a cup of coffee before I teach a class. Of course, there are classes when I don't do this. But it's normal for me to make a cup of coffee before I teach. And I usually do the cooking. I cook from Monday to Saturday, but I rest on Sunday. And finally, there are some chores that I do only occasionally. I rarely vacuum the floor because it never gets very dirty. Now let's look at the things I said about my chores a little more carefully. I said before, I always do the dishes after I finish eating. In this sentence, always is something called a frequency adverb. We use a frequency adverb to talk about how frequently or how often we do something. In the sentence, I sometimes sweep the floor, sometimes is the frequency adverb. And in the final sentence, I never iron my clothes, never is the frequency adverb. Now what do you notice about where we put the frequency adverb in the sentence? We put, for example, always between the subject and the principal verb. In the second sentence, it's between the subject, I, and the principal verb, sweep. And finally, in the last sentence, it's between I and the principal verb, iron. Now, there are some other words or expressions we can use to talk about frequency, and we're going to talk about those other options next. Here are some more expressions you can use to talk about when you do different activities. For example, I do the dishes every day. Every day is the same as saying always. I sweep the floor once or twice a week. Once or twice a week means that you do an activity 1 or 2 days per week. Once is the same as 1. Twice is the same as 2. And in a similar way, you can say, I vacuum the floor once or twice a month. Once means 1. Twice means 2. And what do you notice about these expressions? They always come at the end of the sentence. Every day comes after I do the dishes. So these expressions always come after the main idea of the sentence. Now you're going to do an activity where you talk with a partner about when you do different chores. You must always ask a question using how often. How often means what frequency you do an activity. You must ask questions using the vocabulary in the chart. For example, you might ask your partner, how often do you mop the floor? Your partner might say, I rarely mop the floor, or I mop the floor once a month. Make sure to take turns so that you both ask and answer questions. Good luck.